Let's dive into something hugey this week, like seriously major. Imagine like 170 million people just suddenly, like one day they wake up and boom, no more access to this app they use, like every single day. And that's exactly what went down on January 19th, 2025. TikTok, the app, it's everything. Dance challenges, political debates, you name it. It got officially banned in the U.S.
And this is not like a spur of the moment thing, right? This ban, it's like the climax of years of legal back and forth and, of course, the political maneuvering, all because people are worried about what happens to your data when you use it and whether governments can, like, use these apps to, to influence people.
Totally. It's like something straight out of like House of Cards or something. So in this deep dive, we're going to break it all down. Why it happened, who pulled the strings, and the big one, what happens next, T.
One thing that really surprised me, honestly, is that the law that made this whole ban possible, the one that lets the government just ban apps if they think it's, a national security risk, that thing passed with support from both parties back in 2024.
Both parties. Seriously. That's rare these days.
Yeah.
Especially for something this controversial, right? So it wasn't just about like going after TikTok specifically then?
Right. It was broader than that. The law, it was meant for ANY app. If the company that owns it is from a country the U.S. sees as an adversary, I think was the word they used, the real worry was data security, plain and simple.
Okay. So that's where TikTok's parent company comes in. ByteDance, right? A Chinese company. So yeah, that's going to raise eyebrows. Immediately people are thinking, oh, what are they going to do with our info? Did ByteDance just take this lying down?
No way. They fought hard. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. Their argument was basically, hey, this is censorship. Like the government was trying to silence them.
Yeah, and they lost. Unanimously, which is huge GE. The Supreme Court basically said, nope, national security wins out here. Free speech concerns, they take a back seat in this case.
It's definitely a landmark ruling, no doubt. Sets a precedent for how the U.S. government might handle, any foreign tech company that's doing business here. It's like they're saying the risk of some foreign country messing with us through these apps, that's way scarier than worrying about free speech.
So Supreme Court gives and Biden's administration, they were the ones pushing for this ban, right? They didn't waste any time putting it into action. They saw this as like a key part of their plan to, counter China because China's been getting more and more influential.
100%. It's all part of a bigger pattern with Biden, Remember how we put limits on Chinese companies investing in U.S. tech?
Yeah.
This TikTok ban, it's like the next step in that strategy.
Okay, but here comes the twist and no one saw coming. Trump, he's about to be president again, and he's saying maybe TikTok can come back under the right conditions, of course.
I know, right? It's wild. He's talking about how valuable the app is, especially for reaching younger voters. This is the same guy who said TikTok was a national security threat before. Now he's like, maybe those benefits outweigh the risks.
It's like he's playing chess while everyone else is playing like tic-tac-toe. What's he up to? Is it about getting access to that massive audience, or is he changing his whole stance on China?
It's anyone's guess at this point. But this definitely throws a wrench into the whole ban situation. What seemed like, a done deal. Now it's totally up in the air.
It really, like a political thriller playing out in real life. But we can't forget, there are real people caught in the middle of this. 170 million users, just in the U.S. For a lot of them, TikTok wasn't just an app for funny videos. It was their job, their community, their whole thing.
So true. It's easy to get caught up in the political drama. But the human side of this ban, that's the real story. Imagine pouring your heart into building a following, building a career on TikTok, and then poof, it's gone.
All those creators who built their whole careers on that platform, their income, their connections, gone overnight. And for small businesses too, man, it's a huge hit. TikTok was the place to reach Gen Z and millennials. Now they got to scramble, figure out how to connect with those people without TikTok.
And it's not just about finding a new app, right? TikTok had its own vibe, its own algorithms, its own way of doing things. Businesses, creators, they spent years figuring out how to make it work on TikTok. Now, everything's different.
This whole thing really makes you think bigger, It's not just about some social media app. It's about this whole tension between internet freedom and national security. The U.S. has always been all about a free and open internet, but this feels different, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. This is more like what we see in countries like China, where the government controls what people can see online. Makes you wonder if the U.S. is heading down that road, too.
Like, if they can ban TikTok, what's next? What other app are they going to decide is too risky? It's a scary thought, for sure.
It is, yeah. On one hand, you got this worry that, Some foreign country could use platforms like TikTok to mess with our democracy, but then if governments start banning A and Y app just because they don't like where the company's from, where does it end at E?
Yeah.
Could really stifle innovation, and free speech too.
Yeah, it's complicated, no easy answers. And with Trump potentially shaking things up, the future of TikTok in the US, total mystery. So what are the options here? Could TikTok actually make a comeback? Or is this the end of the line for it in the US?
Well, there are a few possibilities. Maybe ByteDance sells off its U.S. operations to an American company. Then TikTok could come back, but with new management.
Makes sense. But you got to think, even if that happens, there'd be a ton of new rules, way more scrutiny.
Well, absolutely. If the U.S. government was worried about data security before, now they'd be watching like a hawk. They'd want to be 100% sure that this new American company is prioritizing user privacy and making sure there's no way for any foreign government to mess around.
Yeah, like a total makeover. But would that even be enough? Would people forget about those worries about TikTok being tied to China?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine those concerns just disappearing overnight. There'd still be lawmakers, regulators, probably even intelligence agencies keeping a close eye on things.
And honestly, even if a sale happens, who's to say it fixes everything? I mean, we've seen other social media companies, they have problems with data privacy, misinformation, all that stuff. It's not like American companies are perfect, right?
Right, exactly. And then you got to factor in that TikTok's main audience is young people. That adds a whole other layer of pressure and complexity. They got to make sure the platform is safe for kids, no harmful content. And what about addiction, mental health? Those are big issues.
So much to think about. And we can't forget about the whole political side of things. I mean, Trump already flip-flopped on TikTok once. Who knows what his administration will do if an American company takes over?
It's impossible to predict, really. But one thing's for sure, the fight over TikTok. It ain't over yet. This platform, it's got huge cultural and economic influence. It's going to be at the center of all these debates we're having about tech, privacy, free speech, the role of government in the digital world.
And speaking of the digital world, this whole thing has global implications too, right? It's not just the US that's worried about TikTok.
No, absolutely not. India already banned it back in 2020. Same concerns about data and national security. And a bunch of other countries, Australia, Canada, even some in Europe, they're all looking into how TikTok handles data.
So this is a worldwide thing, not just an American problem. Makes you wonder, is this the start of a trend? Are more countries going to start cracking down on foreign tech companies? Are we headed towards a future where the internet isn't this one big global network anymore? Like, what if it becomes a bunch of smaller regional networks?
Yeah. That's a huge EE question, and it has huge EE implications for how we all connect and communicate. It's definitely something we need to explore further. But maybe we should, pick that up when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive.
So we were talking about how other countries are kind of side-eyeing TikTok too. India already banned it, and others are doing their own investigations. Makes you think maybe the U.S. ban is just the first domino to fall.
Yeah, it's definitely a development worth watching. It really makes you wonder where the internet headed. Like the original idea was this open network, right? Connecting everyone, no matter where they are, information flowing freely. But now, are we going towards something more like, I don't know, a bunch of separate internets?
Okay, so imagine that. Like separate internets for different regions. What would that even look like for someone like me? I just use the internet for, regular stuff. I'm no tech whiz.
Well, think about it this way. Suddenly, getting info, talking to people, even doing business online, it all gets way more complicated. It's not just about maybe losing your favorite apps. It's about, more censorship, harder to communicate, even economic barriers popping up.
So, I could wake up one day and my go-to messaging app, the one I use to chat with my friends overseas, it's just gone, banned because the company is based somewhere the U.S. doesn't like. Would I have to get a whole new W app just to talk to them?
That's not out of the realm of possibility, no. And think about the impact on businesses that work internationally, or researchers who need data from all over the place. A fragmented internet throws a wrench in all that. It could really slow down progress and innovation.
And what about, free speech? It seems like if the internet is broken up like that, governments could control what people see and hear even more, right?
That's a huge concern, absolutely. One of the biggest worries with this whole fragmentation thing, it gives governments way more power over information. And in the wrong hands. That's dangerous. They could silence people, censor opinions they don't like, even manipulate the public.
This is starting to sound like a sci-fi movie, the dystopian kind, where the internet is super controlled, everyone's stuck in these little bubbles, only seeing what they're allowed to.
It's a wake-up call for sure. And it's not just governments we got to think about either. The big tech companies, they have a huge role in this too. Their algorithms, their content rules, their business decisions, it all shapes what we see online, what we believe.
Yeah, it's like this power struggle. Between countries, sure, but also within the tech world itself. It's all about who gets to control the information.
Exactly. And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
Whoever wins this, they'll have a ton of influence over everything. Global trade, culture, even how our societies work.
Yeah.
We need to be having these conversations about the future of the internet, about who controls what we see, about how to protect free speech and privacy in this crazy digital world.
So back to TikTok for a sec. This isn't just about one app, right? It's like a tiny version of this bigger problem.
Totally. The TikTok ban, it's just one example of how governments are trying to figure out this whole globalized digital world. We're seeing the same debates pop up with data privacy, online security, even how technology affects international relations.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, an American company does buy TikTok's U.S. operations. What would they have to do to make the government happy? To prove they're not a security risk anymore?
Well, whoever buys it, they're going to be under a microscope. They'd have to agree to a whole bunch of conditions to address those initial concerns.
Like what? Give me some specifics.
Okay, so data storage is a big one. Where and how they keep user data, that's got to be ironclad. Then there's algorithm transparency, basically proving that the algorithm's deciding what users see, that they're fair, not biased. And of course, content moderation, the big one these days. How do they decide what's allowed on the platform and what gets taken down? They might even have to limit who they hire just to make sure there's no way for, a foreign government to sneak in.
Wow, it's like they'd be starting from scratch almost.
Pretty much, yeah. The U.S. government would need to be 100% convinced that this new owner, they're serious about protecting American users' data and making sure there's zero chance of foreign meddling.
But even with all that, wouldn't there still be some doubt? Like TikTok got banned because of its ties to China. Would switching to an American company really make everyone forget about that?
You're not wrong to be skeptical. It's tough to imagine those worries just vanishing overnight. There'd still be lawmakers, regulators, probably intelligence agencies too, all keeping a very close eye on things.
And let's be real. Even if a sale happens, it's not a magic bullet. We've seen other social media companies mess up with data privacy and all that. American companies aren't exactly saints, right?
True enough. And then there's the whole issue of TikTok's user base being mostly young people. That adds a whole nother level of responsibility and scrutiny.
Yeah.
Whoever's in charge, they got to make sure the platform's safe for kids. No harmful content. Got to address things like addiction and mental health.
Yeah, it's a minefield for whoever takes this on.
For sure. And the political battles over TikTok. Probably not over yet, not by a long shot. This platform is huge culturally and economically. It's going to keep being at the center of all these debates we're having about technology, privacy, free speech, the government's role in the digital age.
And speaking of the digital age, this whole situation makes you think, doesn't it? About where all this is headed in the long run. If more countries start banning apps because of national security, what then? What happens to the internet if it's more fragmented, more controlled? That's something I think we need to dig into. What are your thoughts on that? We were talking about this idea of the internet, not being this one big global thing anymore. More like broken up, with governments having more control over what people see. Kind of scary thought, right? What does that even mean for the future of the internet? Is this like the beginning of the end for the open internet we all know?
It's a possibility we got to take seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of the internet originally was to be this global network, connecting everyone, free flow of info, all that. But like we saw with TikTok, governments are more and more willing to just step in and say, nope, you can't access this if they think it's a national security risk.
And if that keeps happening, it's not just about losing some apps. It could change the whole internet, like way more censorship, governments controlling what we see and read, who we can even talk to online.
Yeah, it's kind of chilling when you think about it. The internet's how we do everything these days.
Exactly.
Communicate, learn, do business, political debates. If it becomes fragmented, controlled, that affects every part of our lives.
It's like we're at this fork in the road. One path leads to a more controlled internet broken up into pieces. The other is that original vision, open and connected. But how do we even get there? It feels like such a huge task with governments and these giant tech companies calling the shots.
It's tough, no doubt. but it's not hopeless.
Mm.
First thing is we got to stay informed. We got to understand what's at stake, what these choices we make could lead to, who's pulling the strings, all of it. Read critically, ask questions, have real conversations about this stuff.
So basically, become more savvy about the digital world, not just knowing how to use tech, but understanding how it affects us.
Exactly. We got to be smart about the information we're getting. Be aware of bias, hidden agendas, all that. We got to get how algorithms work, how they shape what we see, because they can be used to manipulate us if we're not careful.
Okay, so that's on us as individuals. But we also got to hold the people in charge accountable, right? The governments, the tech giants, they have to do their part too.
100%. Our elected officials, they have to answer for the decisions they make. About internet rules, censorship, all that. We got to push for policies that protect free speech, any privacy, but also deal with real concerns about security and online harms. It's a balance.
And what about these tech companies? They're so powerful, they basically run our digital lives.
We got to demand transparency from them. Plain and simple. They need to tell us how they're using our data,
Makes sense.
how the algorithms work, what they're doing about misinformation, hate speech, all the bad stuff.
It sounds like a lot, but it feels important, you know? This isn't just about some apps or social media. It's about how we live online, how our democracies function, the world we want to live in.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
The internet can be an amazing tool, connecting people, helping us understand each other, driving progress, all that good stuff. But it can also be used for bad things, control, manipulation, even oppression. The choices we make NOW, they determine what the internet becomes.
So what can we do? As regular people, how can we make sure the internet stays a force for good?
Well, staying informed, holding those in power accountable, that's huge. But you can also support organizations fighting for an open internet. Talk about these issues with people, online and offline. Be mindful of how you act online. Encourage respectful debate, critical thinking. Every little thing adds up.
This has been a wild ride, I gotta say. This deep dive into TikTok, internet freedom, all this, it's made me realize just how much is at stake here and how important it is to stay informed, stay engaged.
We all got to understand the power of the internet. It affects every part of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's up to U.S. to shape its future, make sure it's a positive force in the world.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with some questions to think about. What does the future of the internet look like to Wei Yu? What role do you want to play in making that future a reality? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Stay curious and keep exploring the digital world with open eyes.